Welcome to the Journal podcast from the Chartered Insurance Institute, a place for thought-provoking discussion from the world of insurance and beyond, giving CI members and the wider profession an insight into key developments across the sector and the work of the CII, the professional body dedicated to building public trust in the insurance profession. I'm Michael Bond, social media and production executive at the Chartered Insurance Institute. Have you ever wondered what it really takes to build a career in insurance? Over the coming episodes, we're pulling back the curtain and revealing the diverse paths of people across the profession. From pharmaceuticals to film, motor to retail, we'll uncover hidden corners of insurance and the fascinating stories of the people who make it happen. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Martin Smyth, Head of Insurable Risk for one of the UK's largest automotive manufacturers, JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, to discuss his professional journey through the insurance profession. So Martin, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me on here today, Michael.
You're very welcome. So to begin with, could you tell me a little bit about yourself prior to your professional career?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Birmingham in the West Midlands. Academics wasn't particularly natural for me because I'm dyslexic and I've always kind of struggled in respect of kind of formal academics. However, I did develop a really strong interest in respect of computing and ICT as it was called back then. So I followed that path and completed my A-levels predominantly in ICT type subjects and thought after my A-levels, well, what do I do then? I ended up going to university to do computer science. So I went to Aston University. It was a really tough course, but I graduated it with a 2-2 back in 2012.
Brilliant. And yeah, I can understand having a family member who's dyslexic, some of the difficulties that can come with that. But at the same time, it's great to see that you've been able to achieve a degree in computer science nonetheless. Looking at your first role in the insurance profession, you came in as an underwriting accounts assistant. So could you tell me how this opportunity came up and what it was like?
Yes, absolutely. So being at university does come with some sizable summer holidays. So I thought I'd best find something to occupy my time, but also fund my studies and predominantly my social life. So somewhere in around the Easter time, my first year of study, I came across a summer role for an accounts assistant. So I applied and unwittingly thinking it was going to be something around kind of dealing with receipts or a bit of double entry bookkeeping. But I attended an interview and it was actually at Zurich Insurance in Birmingham. The role was an underwriter's assistant and it was within the financial lines, specifically working on solicitors' professional indemnity insurance. And at that point in time, it actually had a common renewal date of the 1st of October. So that meant that all the solicitor firms in the UK had to renew on that particular date. So you can kind of imagine that during that period of time, all brokers and insurers who work in that particular space, they're absolutely inundated in dealing with loads of inquiries for new business, but also renewals. So the role entailed data entry, so liaising with brokers, kind of reporting branch stats. And once I had a little bit more experience, I was actually undertaking triaging of new business, so kind of working out whether it was within appetite or not. Within this role, my computing skills were a particularly strong asset. So I was really proficient on spreadsheets. So I quickly had branch reporting fully automated. And that enabled the head of region to report the stats daily, which was hours before most of the other branches were able to. I also developed fantastic relationship skills, both internally and with brokers. And I learned an awful lot in such a short period. This led me to being invited back the following summer and then during Christmas and Easter periods too. So the Christmas before I actually graduated, I was actually offered a role of assistant underwriter.
Fantastic. And yeah, I can imagine when you're studying towards something, you don't necessarily have a defined pathway or career to go into, but it's great to see that you were working alongside your studying at university and that gave you an opportunity once you'd finished. And that must have filled you with confidence as well, having done it for the past 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because I had never really excelled academically, I wouldn't have been eligible for kind of graduate schemes. So I guess at that Christmas period when I knew I had a role kind of lined up, I felt quite smug about going into the final kind of term of university, knowing it was already lined up there. So I guess I wouldn't necessarily say I fell into insurance. I'd say I kind of found it, or it found me. So the outcome's the same whichever way around, but in any circumstance, I don't have any regrets.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, we do hear a few people say they fell into insurance, but it's nice to hear that you found insurance. So that's really good. And from there, you went on to become a professional indemnity underwriter and working on construction strategy at Zurich before working for Volkswagen as an insurance accounts executive and insurance manager soon after that. So what interested you about working within motor insurance, and what knowledge and skills had you gained from these roles?
Yeah, so I suppose I'd had a glimpse at the variety of roles available, also the kind of relationship nature of the industry and the financial reward that was on offer in the sector. So I saw it kind of did provide a balance between work and life and reward. In terms of knowledge and skills, that there was so much I learned from osmosis, seeing how my colleagues were dealing with some of the challenges, but also seizing opportunities. That was really good to see firsthand. I also had a great viewpoint in respect of the mechanics of how underwriting truly works. And that's something that has helped me even today, kind of trying to understand how insurers price risks, but also, I guess you've got the market dynamics that also come into that as well. So it's fascinating to see the interactions with underwriters, senior underwriters, actuaries, particularly when there was a case that they wanted to help out a broker on. It was really interesting to see how some of those interactions played out. I guess by far the most important kind of transferable skill was the ability to be able to present a case in a way to convince. So whether that's senior underwriter trying to get sign off or a broker to explain the position, I guess even more regularly now, I'm kind of facing off to senior leadership and boards, trying to explain what's going on in the insurance market and why the program that we're looking to place is the most optimum for the business. So I found that kind of knowing the audience and selling the story, but being able to back it up with data has been paramount in that regard. My underwriting role evolved after a few years, and an internal opportunity came up, and that was within the construction and engineering team. A bit of a unique role. So it's working directly with the leadership team, and we were relaunching the construction proposition for the mid-market. So I was immediately working with the team on market segmentation, sales, actuarial modelling, but also broker schemes as well. I actually recall being given a broker scheme contract and being asked what I thought about it. Having not really touched a contract previously, it was slightly out of my comfort zone, but very interesting process. After the proposition had relaunched, I was approached for an opportunity. It was very different. It was a hybrid role, so both the insurance role and the white label role at Volkswagen. So essentially, it was the other side of the insurance table, being the buyer side. So this is a career that perhaps I hadn't even appreciated existed, particularly when I was in underwriting. I guess you face off to the broker and very rarely to the end customer. I hadn't appreciated who the end customer actually was at that point. So being the end customer to an extent was very, very different. And I guess that what really attracted me to that particular role was the analytical nature of it, and also the appeal of working within automotive. I quickly found myself managing a multi-million-pound insurance spend while also supporting the white label aspects. So I had exposure to the global insurance programs, which included things like complex claims management, contractual liabilities, but also the world of captive insurance. And I experienced firsthand exactly how insurance can help a business seize opportunities. The role got really busy somewhere in around 2015, where we're charged with launching a 2-year warranty campaign in round about 2 weeks. And that was on the back of the Dieselgate scandal. So what this involved was to utilise the Volkswagen insurance captive to provide underwriting capacity for customers in the UK. So we had to interpret quite a complex warranty pricing table in pretty short order to be able to interpret thousands of different models, vehicle ages and engines, and ensure that the right warranty was being applied to the vehicle. It was a process that was taking an incredibly long time. Being dyslexic, I really like logic, and one of the things that I personally really get on well with is kind of visual cues as opposed to words. So the pricing tables were really confusing. So I set about working on a series of flowcharts with some real simple logic, which hugely simplified the process. sometimes I find that just seeing things in a different way really helps enable me to find a unique solution to what is quite a challenging problem. The ultimate output of that was that we hit the deadline, and I believe the 2-year approved use warranty program is still being utilised around about 10 years on.
Nice. You mentioned there about stepping outside your comfort zone. I think it can be really scary when you have to do that, but it's also really rewarding in how you grow. And you can see that from what you've just explained there about how you've developed in Zurich and Volkswagen respectively as well. You've also touched on a few really crucial skills we hear from a lot of people in the profession, such as communication skills, adaptability, problem solving, and covering such a broad range of topics that you mentioned there as well can be really quite difficult and complex. And following on from that, what other types of insurance lines of business have you been involved in?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say I've probably been involved in most lines of business, but certainly not all of them. I guess some of the key areas include the boilerplate lines of business like property and business interruption, all the kind of usual liabilities like EL, PL products, some of the weird and quirky ones like cyber, perhaps trade credit, pension trustees liability, advertising liability. They probably come into the fold as well as some of the employee benefits types of insurance like income protection, medical, death in service and the like. And I've also worked on a few white label products such as warranty, motor and gap insurance.
Oh, great. You mentioned some personal lines there as well as some commercial lines. So it must have been quite fascinating and interesting to work in those areas. And although we've already covered it a little bit, your roles from your first one up to becoming insurance manager have probably changed quite a lot during that time. So how would you say that your job has evolved from your first role up to this one? And what additional responsibilities did you have as you progressed there?
Yeah, so the move from insurer to in-house is a big shift in terms of responsibilities. In the insurer space, I think it's quite defined. You have an underwriting license. You know where you should be involved with and where things perhaps need to be referred. I guess in the in-house space, I don't really have the same extent in respect of where the start and the finish point of my role's remit actually is. So to kind of give you an example of that, during my first week at Next, I remember having a sit-down meeting with the CFO, and she said something along the lines of, absolutely fantastic, we've got an insurance expert in our midst now. It was something that I reflect upon because I've never felt so out my depth at that point, because I've never really looked upon myself as the insurance expert. I kind of think in these type of roles, you're a Swiss Army knife who's got a thin veneer of knowledge around many different types of insurance and insurance matters. In truth, with the in-house roles, because they don't have a defined end to the level of responsibility you hold, your role really is to manage insurable risk in whatever endeavours or situations that the business may find itself in. And at times that does feel a little bit uncomfortable. But the reality is that if I were to have a sizable loss tomorrow, the market I know would respond and deliver. And that's because we've invested the time and effort in presenting our risk accurately, and we're supported by some of the best people and carriers in the market. I've also held some non-insurance type responsibilities. So to give you some examples as to what they look like. So I've sat on some committees such as ESG, risk, audit, injury type committees. And I've always found that with the insurance role, because you've got a cross-business view of the world, it means you're able to connect the dots and also see some risks and opportunities that perhaps some others might not. For the past couple of years, I've also been a board director for AIRMIC. AIRMIC is the Association of Insurance and Risk Managers in Commerce. They represent about 2,000 members who are estimated to spend billions in insurance premiums. It's a privilege to be part of a forward-looking association that represents the interests of the insurance buyers in the market. As I said before, we're often an overlooked party in the insurance chain, but nevertheless incredibly important.
Brilliant. All sounds fascinating stuff. I suppose when you first come into a role, you start with mastering the basics and gaining technical skills and knowledge. And then as you rise through the ranks and move to a more senior role, you look at handling more complex risks and gaining more strategic skills as well as stakeholder management. And focusing on knowledge, during your time at Zurich and Volkswagen, you achieved the certificate in insurance, as well as the diploma and advanced diploma in insurance in 2016, along with becoming a chartered insurance risk manager and fellow of the Chartered Insurance Institute in 2023, which are all fantastic achievements. So What I want to know is, what led you to begin studying in the first place towards professional qualifications?
Yeah, sure. So when you read it back, you make it sound more grandesque than perhaps I actually feel it was myself. But it was made apparent to me, in particular, when you look at the movers and shakers within most insurance organisations, that the people who really got on in their careers generally had a number of characteristics about them. And one of the bits that did stand out for me was most of them had actually taken on some level of insurance-based training in, predominantly that was the advanced diploma. Of those roles, the ones that I thought, you know what, I wouldn't mind having a role that looks and feels a little bit like that. It absolutely felt like it was the right thing to do in respect of scaling up, starting off with my certificate in insurance, which I did whilst I was at Zurich. They were really supportive of the CII qualifications. I think they really saw the value that it provided to their people. For me, as I progressed, I just felt like I need to go and try and get to the chartered insurance status. So to do that, I set about the diploma. Now, that was much harder. I'm quite resilient, but I did almost give up, having failed the law module no less than 3 times. In actual fact, it was the last module that I did. And I thought, if I got that far, I'm definitely not giving up. Once I got my chartership status, I did take a break for a couple of years. My career had changed a little bit, and I felt I needed a wider appreciation of business in the context of not only how they operate, but also aspects around strategy, marketing, communications, and dare I say it, even accounting. So I enrolled upon an MBA course at the University of Birmingham. And at the same time, I also enrolled upon the CII fellowship program. And I used the MBA as my major achievement for the fellowship.
Fantastic. And yeah, I can see from what you've said there about hitting a barrier, it can be difficult to keep going, but clearly you've shown a lot of resilience and it's paid dividends for you. And gone on to achieve our highest level of qualification and become a chartered insurance risk manager as well. So it's really inspiring stuff, Martin. So we've looked at it from a professional perspective, but on a more personal level, how valuable are these qualifications and how have they helped you progress in your career?
I guess when you start out and enroll upon the qualification, you don't really know where it's going to take you. But when I look back, I don't think I would have been considered for some of the roles that I have held without actually having the qualification. I think they are generally considered essential in certain roles, or at the bare minimum, they help you stand out amongst the crowd. Aside from just having the qualifications, though, which I guess is akin to having the driving license, the ability for people to identify that you've got a base level of knowledge to apply, I think what they did for me more was actually to provide the confidence. So the confidence that I've got a solid grounding and understanding of insurance and that I'm able to turn my hand to most insurance matters. Interestingly, only a few weeks ago, my team and I were deliberating approximate cause when considering a claim scenario. So that's certainly an aspect that I think is still within the IF1 module. So very much at the forefront of our mind, and who knew it would still be up there in my grey matter somewhere.
Oh, brilliant. And just touching on your confidence there, you mentioned previously that you hit a bit of a barrier with your diploma in insurance. How did you go from maybe a moment of low confidence to building it back up over time? Is it just with continual learning? Is it the actual achievement in the end that does it for you? What's helped you build your confidence in your career so far?
That's a really interesting question, really, Michael. I think for me, we mentioned earlier about stepping outside your comfort zone. You find that you're actually able to do something. And when you look back upon it and think, wow, how did I actually get from not even understanding anything about a particular topic to getting to the end of it and thinking I've achieved and delivered that? And there's probably quite a few examples I've got of that, you know, whether it's the first time presenting to the insurance market, there's a lot of faces there. You find yourself trying to articulate a particular point of how we manage risk, and all of a sudden you're in the limelight. And I guess going through that process, it's just a case of actually just applying yourself, jumping into it, perhaps not worrying about making any mistakes and just trying your best, really.
Brilliant. That all makes a lot of sense, Martin. And looking on from your qualifications and your roles at Zurich and Volkswagen, you then went on to join the retail company Next as group insurance manager between 2019 and 2022. And during this period, we obviously had a global pandemic, which affected the way that we all worked. But from an insurance and risk perspective, what impact did this have on your work and how did you adapt during this period?
Yeah, so it's a testing and worrying time for all, really. But we set about immediately closing down the business and dealing with some of the challenges that fell out on the back of that. So to give you a few examples, there's warranties and conditions that were being breached where checks and maintenance was unable to be undertaken. Immediately overnight, we were into just a purely digital world. So you're on calls, as I'm pretty sure everybody was, often back to back. And it was a really, really challenging period. I think with the market moving to online only interaction, particularly given the insurance market at that point in time, it was almost certainly face to face. That was quite interesting. I think we lost a bit of the personal connection at that point, but thankfully, I think some of that has been regained. I guess some of my lasting memory of the pandemic was actually trade credit insurance. That was a huge part of my time, organising things like rescheduling agreements, ensuring that some of our partners could continue to trade. I guess I became an expert of lockdowns, not only just in the UK, but also globally, as they were happening at different times. I think as time progressed, we were definitely looking at reopening the business and doing that in an orderly and safe manner. So we were managing things through like flammable hand sanitizer being everywhere, 2-meter stickers, masks, generating risks across the business. It's certainly a memorable occasion, but not one I'd like to repeat.
Absolutely. And I think it's not just people within the insurance profession, but across all professions had lost that personal connection during that time, all going to working from home or some people being furloughed or even losing their positions. So it was an incredibly worrying time for everyone. But it's nice to know at least during your role, you were able to gain some new skills from it and you've regained those personal connections now as well. So whilst it's not what we would wish for anyone, it's nice to know that during a bad period, you were able to make the most from it and giving you some new skills going forward. And hopefully it won't happen again, of course, but it's good to have those skills and to be prepared for those sorts of situations. And since then, you moved on to your current role, which is Head of Insurable Risk at JLR. So can you tell us a bit about JLR and what your day-to-day role looks like within there?
Sure. So JLR for me is a really special business, particularly in the Midlands, but predominantly for my own family. So my uncle, my stepdad, my cousin, they've all worked or are still working for the business. And I remember some years ago as a little boy being picked up by my uncle in, I think it was a Jaguar XJ when he was looking after us once. That's probably my first connection to one of the brands that we have. I'll talk a little bit about JLR before kind of moving on to the day-to-day. A couple of points really. So JLR have got a reimagined strategy. So with that, we're aiming to deliver a sustainability-rich vision of modern luxury by design. So we're setting about transforming the business with the aim to become carbon net zero. And central to that is an electrification strategy, which before the end of the decade, we'll see each of our brands have a pure electric model, and Jaguar itself will be entirely electric. Bringing that back to insurance, I'll give you a flavour of some of the activity that I and my team get involved in. So I lead a team of 4 insurable risk specialists. We're charged with managing the global insurance risk programme for JLR. It's a sizable insurance programme that sees us involved across the business. On a day-to-day basis, we might be undertaking on-site insurance risk engineering inspections, or we could be advising some of the project teams on the insurable risk aspects. Sometimes we're involved in dealing with some of the claims activities and the complexities that does provide us, particularly in some jurisdictions. And more recently, we've been helping support the development of new products and services, such as the new Range Rover electric vehicle that's currently undergoing global testing. As products near their launch, we also demonstrate the capabilities to the media. So some of my team were involved in the global media drive for the Defender Opta. That's the V8 powered Defender that's been tested across the world. And my team were involved in making sure that the event in South Africa was taken care of. Part of the role also includes helping enhance some of the client experiences that we provide. One way we've been doing this is through the launch of Range Rover houses globally. These are specially curated luxury experiences in really special locations, such as within Austria, where clients get to explore the products and learn about the possibilities of personalising their Range Rover product. We also support our Jaguar TCS Formula E racing team, who compete globally in the Formula E Championship. Innovations from some of their initiatives, such as demonstrating the feasibility of re-refined oil, have been significant and embedded back into the business. The team is due to compete in Monaco next month. Sometimes there's also some of the less glamorous aspects, such as budgeting, objectives, supplier KPI reviews, to name a few. They're necessary evils, but getting the basics right sets us up for success.
Brilliant. I mean, just to touch on what you first said there, it's probably been beneficial for you to have family who've worked for JLR already. It must have given you confidence that it's a really great place to work. Did you find that?
I think it gave me a real insight into the importance of the business for the UK. And with that, you could get insight into some of the complexities of the activity. But I guess for me, automotive is a really tangible product. And because of that, the recognition of the brand worldwide, it really does help, particularly in the insurance space. It's not often that we have spaces at some of our insurer presentations. I think it's just the appeal, really. The pull of the brand really does help.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned there are a couple of global media events, and another aspect we have to touch on is Formula E. Is that a new venture for Jaguar, or is that something that's been there for quite a while now?
Yeah, so the Jaguar TCS Racing is a collaboration between Jaguar and Tata Consultancy Services. So we compete in the all-electric Formula E series, and the team there has been a part of the championship basically since its inception. And it's consistently pushed the boundaries of electric vehicle technology and sustainable practices. They're currently competing in the latest Generation 3 vehicle, the Jaguar I-Type 7, I believe. And they've recently competed in Saudi Arabia, Miami, and Brazil. And in actual fact, this weekend, they'll be competing in a double-header race in Monaco. So as you can imagine, there's quite a few insurable aspects that we cover off for all the JLR people working with the team.
That sounds really exciting stuff, and maybe more away from the day-to-day product lines that Jaguar normally promote. This is a really cool venture that they're pursuing there. So it all sounds really broad, really interesting and complex as well. So seems like a really great role to be in. And focusing a bit more on that, what do you enjoy most about your role? But also, what are some of the challenges that you faced?
For me, it's the variety and the opportunity, not only to support my team and grow and deliver fantastic results for the business, but I guess the reality is that we're here to ensure that if the worst does happen, the business has got the financial resilience through insurance to withstand those shocks. And the importance of that is huge when you consider that this business supports millions of clients, 40,000 employees and their families, and probably tens of thousands of others in the supply chain. They rely upon us. So I guess one of the main challenges within the role is managing the complexity and scale of JLR's global insurable risk program. We've got operations that span multiple countries. Each has got its own regulatory environment, each with its own nuances in the risk landscape. So making sure that we've got comprehensive coverage in a compliant way can be daunting. You also have to balance some of these demands and maintain some real strong relationships with insurers and brokers, making sure that we've got accurate risk assessments and valuations. It all requires meticulous attention to detail and also, I guess, a little bit of strategic foresight. The real fast-paced nature of automotive means that we've got to constantly adapt to new risks, such as those that are associated with emerging technologies.
Absolutely, and I've touched on it previously as well, but the variety, opportunity and complexity of your role you have seems to make it something that you really enjoy, which is brilliant. And looking at the automotive space in general, what are some of the emerging risks in the motor insurance market and how are insurers adapting to them?
It's well reported that now the automotive industry is undergoing its biggest change pretty much since the internal combustion engine was introduced. So I guess we could debate whether some of these risks are emerging or they're already here, but to name a couple off the top of my head. So we've got supply chain risks, so global conflicts, trade tensions, particularly topical, and climate-related losses causing disruption there. We've also got things like managing the transition to electrification and also autonomous features. So within the JLR's reimagined proposition, electrification is obviously a cornerstone of that. So we're committed to delivering sustainability-rich vision of modern luxury by design. And electrification for each of the brands means that we're heavily investing in moving our production to electrical vehicles and ensuring that we're able to support that transition. In terms of insurers, they're broadly supportive of embracing new technologies and also working with us to manage some of the emerging risks. I guess many insurers are investing in their own expertise and also developing bespoke products to address some of these risks. For instance, you're starting to see that there are synergies between climate risk engineering and normal property risk engineering. So you're starting to see that some of the insurers are developing their own proposition to bring those two together.
That makes sense. And I can imagine that large supply chains, electric vehicle policies changing as well, and with everything changing in geopolitics every day. So being able to adapt to the changing environment is really important, especially for a large company like JLR that operate in so many different countries as well. You need to be able to engage with regulators and think on your feet quite quickly and adapt to the situation. So that all makes a lot of sense. Looking back at your career, what would you say have been some of the milestones or turning points that have had the most impact?
So I think there's probably a collection of things as you look back at some of the roles that I've held, probably starting off. One of the most memorable moments was possibly underwriting my first new business case. That was a really cool experience. It was the beginning of my underwriting career. I guess when I moved in the in-house sphere, I mentioned it earlier, so presenting to insurers for the first time, it's incredibly nerve-wracking, but also very rewarding to be able to communicate not only our needs, but also to build those relationships and kind of ultimately sell the risk of the business. More recently, leading a team has been one of the most fulfilling aspects of my career. So being able to support and champion the team to deliver fantastic results, that's really rewarding as you see people able to grow and develop outside of their own comfort zones. Completing my MBA and CII qualifications, they're really good to have a solid foundation in terms of knowledge and skills. I've also taken a position as a director on a captive insurance company, and more recently set up a captive insurance company. So both of those aspects, they really push you in terms of the expertise and the responsibilities that you hold. And some of that has also played out, as you see that I've taken on the AMIT board position. I've run some special interest groups and generally look to contribute to the broader insurance and risk management community. I guess at the start of each of these milestones, you often feel unprepared or perhaps unsure if you could deliver. But each time you find that I've personally have rose to the challenge and succeeded and then moved off and perhaps done something different.
That's fantastic, Martin. Some really good stuff there. Just to ask you a bit more about becoming a manager at JLR, how did you find the transition from being solely line managed, I suppose, to then managing others? How did you deal with that? And is it something that you enjoy?
Yeah, so I'm not going to lie, at the start, it was incredibly daunting, but I really, really enjoy being able to be able to assist and make sure that people have got what they need to be able to grow and deliver. For me, I did find it, and I'm pretty sure everyone who does make the first move into management probably would say the same, but I did find it a real difficult challenge to get to the point where you're able to just direct and let go and allow them to find their own way. It was around about that time that I reached out through my network and sought a mentor. The aim for me was to start to be able to get a different viewpoint, perhaps from somebody in industry rather than within my own company, so they could kind of help me advise and navigate some of the challenges that do arise, not only out of management, but also, I guess, in terms of managing the market, working with brokers, working in the industry. Having an external viewpoint is really, really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice to know that, like many people would have done as well, when you go into a new area or you're presented with a new challenge, you went to seek help and advice, which I'm sure many people can relate to. And I'm sure going forward, you'll be able to pass on advice to others. So it's nice that it can continually be paid forward. So we've looked at the past and currently looked at the present as well. So looking ahead to the future, what are your hopes for the future, both in terms of your own career and the profession in general?
Yeah, so for me, there's quite a lot of projects within JLR that I'm really keen to achieve. So I'm looking forward to the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead with that. Ultimately, I'm not sure where my career will take me, but I'm pretty certain that it will be within the insurance and risk sphere. It doesn't really concern me that there's no clear career ladder as such, because I guess I've seen that the best people create their own opportunities through kind of delivering consistently, hard work, but probably most importantly, treating people with respect and fairness, plus having a bit of fun along the way. From a personal perspective, I guess that dovetails into perhaps some of the background, but I'd like to see greater diversity being embraced. I think that is starting to happen, but I believe through diversity we'll achieve alternative thinking and innovation in a profession that perhaps has been traditionally quite slow to evolve.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I think that can only better the profession going forward as well. And I suppose one final question before we bring it to a close that I have. Along the way, you've obviously would have had to make certain decisions and go down a particular pathway with your career. Would you have done anything differently looking back?
I probably would have tried to work a little bit more in terms of kind of confidence early on in the profession. I think when you look at people who were just able to eloquently kind of stand up and provide their opinion, I was never that person. I was kind of sit on my hands and wait to be asked type person, particularly early on in my career. But I think as you kind of perhaps get a bit wiser, you realise that in actual fact, having the confidence to articulate what you're thinking is a really powerful skill in its own right. So I guess that's probably one thing I probably would have done differently. But other than that, absolutely not. I've really enjoyed my career in insurance so far, and I'm certainly looking forward to the future too.
Excellent. I know we've touched on this a few times already, but having confidence for any profession, any role, or anything in life really is key. And even though you said maybe you didn't have that confidence at the start, it's really grown now and you do have that vital skill, which is absolutely fantastic, Martin. So that brings us to the end of the podcast. It's been really fascinating talking to you, Martin, about your work for lots of different companies in different sectors, currently in JLR. And it's been great to understand the broad scope of things that you and the company do and lots of the challenges coming up, but I'm sure you'll take them all in your stride, Martin. So thanks for joining me on the podcast today to discuss your professional journey. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
And thank you for listening to this episode of the Journal Podcast. You can find useful links in the show notes and related articles on the Journal website, along with further podcasts. Please like, review, and subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.